Hi, I'm Old Norse Specialist Dr. Jackson Crawford, and in this video I am finishing reading the narrative parts of The Lord of the Rings, the final chapters of The Return of the King, uh, Proprio Sensu. This is not the end of our journey. This is but a waypoint because I still have the appendices to read, uh, and if anything, it makes almost more sense for me to comment on the appendices than on the narrative because there's so much language in there. And I will probably read the Silmarillion too, at least among works of J.R.R. Tolkien. I might do some more after that, but it seems like the Silmarillion makes a lot of sense to read. So let's get started with this. I might even have a copy of the Silmarillion. I have moved so much that I have had this compulsion to just leave my stuff at other people's houses over the years because I didn't want to move it. And if I was slightly reluctant to throw it away, I would often leave it just at somebody else's house. So my sister gave me a copy of the Silmarillion, a really nice illustrated copy, I think illustrated by Ted Nashmeet. So I may be able to find that if it's somewhere halfway findable. I always say this, but I feel like this part of the book is, you'll probably repeat after me at this point, one where there isn't much for me to say as an Old Norse guy. There's a little bit, though. In the field of Cormelin, we have a minstrel, still a word that feels slightly culturally out of place. Hello, little nuthatch. But he says that he wants to speak a lay, L-A-Y. Always hated this word as a word for poem in modern English. It's, and a lot of people insist on using it in the names of poems in the Poetic Edda, and just no one born since 1600 grew up saying lay for poem, right? It is a word people learn and insist on with their I don't know, their pince nez, kind of glaring at you. Sorry, I'm just watching all these little pygmy nuthatches that don't seem to notice that I'm here, and I just realized there's a horseshoe that's nailed to one of these trees. I wonder who did that and when. Anyway, so I just don't like the word. I would rather say something straight up like poem. The only other thing I had in that chapter was, I still don't understand what the hell elves are supposed to be, and I'm sort of charmed that I finished the entire narrative of this book without getting a clear picture of what an elf is. Again, that's just part of J.R.R. Tolkien's mastery of world building. But Legolas says that there's an area of Ithilien, and quote, "Some of our folk shall remove hither, and when we come, it shall be blessed for a while." Off quote. So are they angels, right? I mean, that really, I feel like that's the closest thing that I can think of to what Tolkien's picturing for an elf. It's not a Keebler elf. It's not a Dungeons and Dragons elf, as much as the conception of those probably owes to Tolkien. It's like an angel combined with maybe a pinch of Huldafolk from Iceland. Wow, you're really close to me, little nuthatch. What can I do for you? My word. You're closer to me than my camera is. Oh my goodness, you have an eye missing. I've been visited by the Odin of nuthatches. Oh, I'm sorry to see that, little nuthatch. My word. How are you making it through this winter? Hold on, folks. This is a special moment. I don't want to disturb this little bird. Oh, there he went. Wow, that was something to see. A one-eyed pygmy nuthatch. Poor thing. Where was I? Yeah. So, by the way, this is as good a point as any for me to mention that I think that there is a genius to this work. I have carped about it. I probably carped a little bit more about the movies, to be fair, but I have carped about this work a little bit. You know, some of the old-fashioned language that I find more annoying than pleasant. But and I'm a person who's again his profession is old-fashioned language. Um, but my word, I mean, clearly J.R.R. Tolkien didn't do this anticipating that it would be made into the biggest movies of the following millennium so far, right? Um, I I read through this thinking this guy did this for himself, right? Guided by some inner genius in the classical sense, right? By almost like a demon in the classical sense inside of him. He would appreciate probably my use of genius and demon in these senses. Um, you know, I don't know if he thought for 1 second about his audience, and there's something brilliant about that, right? He wrote something so complete in itself, in his own conception, that pleases him, that he doesn't even care when words in his made-up languages sound like words in our language, right? He doesn't care what teleporno sounds like. He doesn't care that the fields of Celebrant would be read by people as celebrant, right? He doesn't care that you're going to read Círdan as Círdan. He doesn't care that, you know, I presume he doesn't care that Sharku in Orcish looks like shark in English. He just he did this for himself, and I feel like that is the mark of either the most brilliant, wonderful, original literature, and of course this is brilliant and original. Every fantasy novel in the last 70 years has copied this, right? But it's also a mark sometimes of the worst literature because, you know, the other fantasy novel with which I'm most familiar, thanks to 372 pages we'll never get back, is Antigua, the land of wizards, fairies, and heroes. And it is the same way, right? I don't feel like they thought for an instant about what their audience was really like. They just wrote a god awful novel uh, that is, you know, amazingly funny to read because it's so completely within some, well, some one or two human beings' heads. So, as a glimpse inside another human being's head, and a human being who, and I don't say this to flatter myself, is like me in some respects, right? Obsessed with language, right? Obviously, J.R.R. Tolkien is obsessed with language. Different personality than mine, different approach to some of these things, but obsessed with some of the same languages too. It is sort of a privilege to be able to get into somebody's head this way, and also to kind of nod and appreciate that, yes, very few people would ever get the opportunity to get something like this published. So I can sort of doff my hat and respect to a man who did something kind of crazy from the 1940s, 50s, got it published, and without caring that it was, had it become a global phenomenon. With that, let me give you a quick word from my friends and partners at Grimfrost, and I'll be right back. So this video isn't overly long. Let me give you a quick word about my friends and partners in Grimfrost, a quick word about an offer that I have on Patreon, and then come back to talk about some grammar differences. First of all, Grimfrost, my good friends there in Sweden, in Karlstad, they make great replica Viking stuff, and they also sell other great replica Viking stuff or stuff for people interested in Vikings, including my books. So especially if you're in Europe, check them out as a source for my books, and wherever you are, check them out as a source for cool Viking stuff like replica weapons, board games, amulets, things like that. If you're into the prose editing, you want to see that translation faster, you can always join my Patreon at the new Skald tier, where you get a monthly live meeting with me where I'm going over the most recent part that I've translated, showing you the Old Norse, showing you what I've done with it, taking your questions, feedback, etc. So you'll be the first people in the world to see or hear any part of that. So check that out if you're interested. I'm still shook by the oathing of nuthatches. All right, so we have the steward and the king. Chapter, this is where the romance between Faramir and Éowyn begins to bloom, although, like in Antigua, we seem to get dangerously close to this being the land of wizards, fairies, and the friend zone, as my friend Connor joked when Éowyn calls Faramir, quote, my friend, off quote. We've all been there, Faramir. Also, you know, I noted that he makes quite a big deal in describing Faramir, Denethor, uh, Boromir, and Aragorn, and some of the other rangers as having black hair. It struck me here particularly because we read about Faramir's hair, his raven hair streaming together with Éowyn's golden hair. And the movies don't do a good job of making that a characteristic of the people of Gondor. I feel like this could just be going out on a limb, that we are meant to think of them as sort of Romans, right? Again, with this possible analogy of Minas Tirith with Roman or even specifically Byzantine Empire. But I don't feel like that was. I don't feel like we got that image in the movies. But I found myself thinking of them often as, you know, like centurions almost, in an image, which I don't feel like is what we got in the movies. I found, some of the stuff about the right king is going to come back and he's going to fix what ails you and all of that, just sort of disquieting from my classical American small r Republican feeling that, there's no right ruler. Rulers suck, and you just elect people for the shortest terms possible so that, you counterpoise their interests so that they do the least damage they can to you. It's just something kind of disquieting about this notion that there even is a right ruler. Now, there are places and cultures and times when the feeling of the right ruler is very prominent, and I feel like maybe it's even coming back among some people in the modern world. But um, I don't know. It doesn't read comfortably to me, right? I've never worshipped a ruler or politician or whatever, and this seems to get weirdly close to sort of worshiping Aragorn sometimes. Cool as Aragorn is, I acknowledge that he is. Doesn't mean that his heirs are going to be cool, right? The Warden of the Houses of Healing says that he will, quote, bid her farewell, off quote, when Eowyn leaves. Of course, that doesn't just mean say goodbye, it means bid that she fare well, bid that things go well with her, right? That's, of course, where farewell originally comes from. But I feel like a lot of modern readers would just read that as saying, see ya, but he's actually saying, I hope things, I'm wishing you well. We finally get a little bit more Old English in the chapter Many Partings when we get a bunch of names of um, Rohirrim. I gather from having peeked at the appendices now that Sindarin is supposed to be emphasized that way. I think it may be Sindarin. I think that may be the right stress pattern, but I think it's supposed to be Rohirrim, and I was saying Rohirrim. My default foreign language is Old Norse or Icelandic, so I tend to emphasize unfamiliar words on the first syllable. We get Gleowinna, who's a um, poet. That would mean either glee friend or potentially with the same double meaning in English if you think about a glee club, song friend, which I think is probably both are kind of intended. We get a bunch of names of leaders of the Rohirrim as they go through Theoden's ancestry. We get Errol, again, just like Earl leader. Brego, another word for prince. Most of these are just words basically for prince. Aldor, Baldur, Freya, Freya Winna would be like prince friend, lord friend. Goldwinna, gold friend. Deor, precious. Gram would be another word for like, yeah, prince, ruler, king. That's also the name of the sword of Sigurdur in the Saga of the Volsungs. Freyalaf, so Lord Survivor. Almost too on the nose since he's the beginning of a new line that's not directly descended from the previous line of kings. Leova, so the dear one, the loved one. Walda, powerful one. Folka, again, I take that as like just prince. Folkwinna, people friend. Fengel, Thengel, Theoden, all just strike me as words for king. In fact, kind of weird names, right? Theoden isn't a name in Old Norse or Old English. It's something you call, Hrothgar. We read that at the feast where they remember Theoden, that Eowyn and Faramir are, quote, troth-plighted, off quote. That's a very nice old way of saying engaged. So they plight their troth, they pledge their truthfulness to each other. Troth also has been used by some modern pagans, worshippers of the Norse gods, as a name for their religion, right? It's because the root there in troth or true is also used for belief in early Germanic languages like Old Norse, Old English. And I'm just surrounded by a cloud of nuthatches and some mountain chickadees. It's fun. There was an interesting moment where Amer says to Mary, quote, farewell now, Mary Oddock of the Shire and Holdwinna of the Mark, off quote. So hold one would be faithful friend. Is he just calling him that, although it's capitalized and compounded? So is that like Mary's Rohirric name? Strikes me as possible, although I don't remember ever seeing it before. Also, didn't know that, or well, didn't know. Never mind. Eowyn gives Mary a horn, which he's going to use a lot in the later chapters. Uh, we read that it has, quote, runes of great virtue. I don't know what that means. I mean, I assume just that cool things are written on it in runes. And we read that it comes from the horde of Shatha the worm. That SC in the name, SCATHA. SC in Old English is read as Shah, so I assume it would be Shatha. By the way, in a previous video, it occurs to me I might have said that the name of the Old English poet was Scope, and I should have said Shope. But of course, it's part of my Scandinavian prejudice, right? It is a ska in Old Norse or Icelandic. Speaking of Old Norse, Treebeard welcomes Gandalf and company to the Treegarth of Orthanc. Of course, Garth is the Norse cognate of yard, so it's just the tree enclosure. The Garth, I don't know if you can see any of the fence around this place. I don't want to move this phone since it's sitting on snow, but it's the fence that encloses the homestead. So the gods live in Osgardr, right? The enclosure around the gods. Humans live in Midgard, they're the middle enclosure. Popular 90s country music singers live in the Brooks Garden. Anyway. Treebeard, I note, also says orcs are bow-legged, so I guess they do walk like Gary Cooper. Treebeard says that never is too long a word, even for him. Yeah, people do throw around words like never and forever. I did not understand what Celeborn meant when he said to Aragorn, quote, "Kinsman, farewell, may your doom be other than mine, and your treasure remain with you to the end," off quote. Is Celeborn staying behind when Galadriel goes to the Havens? I didn't pick that up, but that was true. And I thought it was pretty funny when they met Saruman on the road, and Gandalf asks him where he's going. Saruman says, quote, "What is that to you?" off quote. And it sounds like a teenager is upset that you want to know where he was, until 11 at night or something. "What is that to you, Dad?" I was surprised to see elves and Gandalf communicating telepathically, so I hadn't thought that had been established as one of their powers as yet. Oh my God, it's getting cold and windy again. I mean, it's something like 12 degrees. It's warmer than it ever was in the last couple days, but it's still pretty cold. All right. I have very, very, very little written as the hobbits come back to the Shire. I mean, I understand the point of these chapters, I think, right? Yes, cinematically, I also get why Peter Jackson wouldn't want to film this. This is a decision I understand. It's a little anticlimactic after you've had the big crowning of Aragorn and his wedding to Arwen, and you defeated all the enemies. To have the hobbits come back and have to have this little postscript fight with a beaten down Saruman, it's not as cinematically fulfilling. Not that I think the movie's imperfectly either. They do have famously, 17 endings. But it moves along at a faster clip than this. And this does slightly drag, but I think that I understand part of the point is that, you've got to go back to your regular daily life at some point. You will be changed, and your regular daily life may have been disrupted in the time that you've been gone, right? I feel like this is an experience of World War I veterans, such as J.R.R. Tolkien, or World War II veterans, such as the next generation of Brits, might have experienced very, very, very poignantly. So I get it, but I do, in this instance, understand what Peter Jackson was doing in not filming this part. It's also, Saruman is so intimidating in Orthanc. To have him brought low to this point, it's just where he's ordering hobbits around and stealing their tobacco. It's, I don't know if that's all that satisfying. Maybe it's sort of satisfying if, and I know he says that it's not an allegory, but I have to think that he's thinking about the World War somewhat. If he's thinking about, your Hitlers, your Stalins, your Mussolinis, and how without their magic over the crowd, these are just guys who might be holed up in someone's house, bossing people around and just being jerks on a small scale. Um, I guess it's kind of bringing the mighty and evil down to size. Um, I don't know. I appreciate it while also not feeling like these chapters were great page turners. But I understand the point of them, I think. Um, and toward the very end, and there's all this anxiety about home and about being controlled and overridden at home. And I get some of this too. I feel like not the same way, right? I'm sure that a veteran of the World War is coming home to a, a wrecked and regimented England, with wartime socialism, the wartime nanny state. Um, I understand the anxiety. I think again, not not that I've been here, but I think I can put myself in those shoes and feel the anxiety of coming home and saying, oh, gosh, is this even the same place that I left, that I thought I was fighting for, that my friends died for? Um, I can see some of that anxiety. I feel like bleeding through these pages. Um, it does bring it home a little bit, and it makes me think that reading the Silmarillion, just as much more as there might be to say in comparison to something like Norse myth, that it won't quite be the same kind of page turner, the same kind of imagination capturer. Um, for this reason, that it doesn't bring it back to home like this, right? I don't feel like there's a Shire in the Silmarillion. I do remember reading it a long time ago, um, or characters that you can get into the head of, right? I feel like I can understand Pippin, right? I get what Pippin might do or say. I don't think that I can get what Feanor would do or say, right? Feanor would never notice me or speak to me, right? But Pippin, I feel like would have a story at the Prancing Pony to tell or something. You know what I mean? Uh, now I sound like I'm an Iowa voter evaluating, caucus candidates or something. But I think this is also part of why The Lord of the Rings satisfies and intrigues modern readers more than something like Beowulf or the Icelandic sagas or the Kalevala do, as much as the story is rooted in those. Because, if you read the saga of the Volsungs or anything in the Poetic Edda, or if you read Beowulf or read, you know, really any part of the Kalevala either, there's no Shire, right? You don't relate to these beings. These are beings who are very different from you. Now, some of the Icelandic sagas have people that you can relate to. I feel like you can relate to Gisli Sorson. I feel like you can relate maybe to some degree to someone like, you know, Rever. Um, I've covered both of those sagas in short summaries on this channel, by the way. Um, but then people don't really read those because a lot of the reason why people read Icelandic literature at all now in the English speaking world or outside of Iceland is, maybe even inside Iceland, in current generations, is because it legendarily inspired Tolkien. But then they don't find anything very much like Tolkien because even those stories that are more relatable, say the saga of Gisli Sorsen, they don't have much, you know, of the breadth of the pagan world about them. Often these stories are kind of just at the junction of paganism and Christianity, and aren't immersed in the world of the old gods, which people are so fascinated by and want to read more about. Um, the Lord of the Rings puts you in that world of the old gods and gives you people who are relatable that you feel like you might actually have as neighbors or classmates or old friends or new friends. Anyway, I'm sure all of that has been said by someone out there, but those are some of my thoughts as the page turns to the very last one. Frodo prophesies the names of Sam's kids. I thought that was a funny, legitimately uh, medieval touch, by the way, because of course in medieval literature, the wise are almost always foresighted, right? And of course we expect that of our own wise people. I have a video somewhere on this channel called Prophecy Among the Norse and Us, where I talked about this weird expectation that they have and we have that smart people can see the future, regardless of what they're smart about. But I thought that was a perfect touch almost to nearly end on. At least one of Frodo and Sam's last interactions is Frodo is becoming, Njal or something from the Icelandic sagas. He's so wise that he can see the future. Or maybe he's becoming like Fafnir. in Fafnismal, who's just been given his mortal wound by the hero Sigurður, and begins to see beyond the present time and the present realm. He begins to see other realms and times long before and long after. The dead get sort of dissociated from time, and peer over the realm of our world, and perhaps there see a swift sunrise on a far green country. Well, I don't think that I've truly finished The Return of the King. The appendices, I think, have to count as part of it. But I've finished the narrative in its main whole. And at this point, my grandfather would always rate a book 1 to 10. And he would always write in the front pages of the book how he had rated it. And I don't know what my rating is for this just yet. Very seldom did he rate a book above 7. 7 of 10 would be a favorite of his. 10 of 10 was some unattainable perfection. I don't know. I'll think about it. You know, I don't use Goodreads, and I used Amazon reviews sparingly maybe a decade and a half ago. So I'm not used to rating things numerically, but if I think of an overall review, maybe I'll post that one way or another. But it's been enjoyable. I wouldn't say that I think I'll reread this every year the way some people do. There are books I do reread every year, on which the names Robinson Jeffers, Cormac McCarthy, Eric Hoffer, and Olaf Helga figure big. For anybody who wants to go dig into the works that inspire the world's least employable man. But it was worth reading. An interesting trip through another person's mind, and beautiful in its way. So I appreciate it. I understand how this became a sensation, and nothing attests better to its beauty than the absolute flock of imitators that appear on shelves every single year. Well, for now, thank you, Patreon, for your support of this channel at patreon.com/NorthBySouthwest. That's NorthBySW. And for now, from beautiful Colorado, I hope you all know that I am verily, I deem, wishing you all the best.